To my YouTube channel, Lady the Coder. Today we're going to be talking about loops in JavaScript. What are loops? How we can use them in JavaScript. Before diving to the lectures, please make sure to watch the previous lectures on JavaScript in order to follow along. Let's just dive into the lecture. Loops. So sometimes we need to execute some block of code, multiple times. We have certain ways of doing that, and we can make use of loops over here, or we can just repeat our code. But the shorter way is to use loops. So what are basically loops? We often need to repeat some actions in JavaScript or any programming language. For example, running the same code for multiple times. Loops are a way to repeat the same code multiple times, so it gives you the flexibility or gives you the way to repeat the same code multiple times. So each repetition in that loop is called an iteration. We have different loops in JavaScript, and let's just learn and talk about it one by one. The while loop. What is a while loop? The while loop has a syntax of this. You can see that we have a keyword while, followed by a pair of parentheses, and then we have a condition over here, and then the body of the loop, or you can execute some block of code. So this is the block of code that you want to execute based on this condition through the while loop. While the condition is true, the code from the loop body is executed. So what happens is, if you evaluate the condition over here, the while loop will evaluate the condition. So all the time the loop will be repeated unless this condition is true. So unless the condition is true, the loop will be executed again and again. Once the condition becomes false, we'll see how it really works. And once the condition is false, then the loop will be stopped. Any expression or variable can be a loop condition. We can posit any expression or a condition, not just comparison. The condition is evaluated in the while loop and converted to a boolean by the while. So it's just converted to a boolean value, true or false. So as we know that a boolean value can either be true or false, not other value, and it is converted to true or false, the condition, wherever we pass by a while loop, and the comparison is done by that. So until the condition is true, the loop will be executed again and again. Once it is false, then it will stop executing. So let's just put our hands on this and see how it really works. I'll just get rid of the old code over here, and I'll just clean up the screen for now. For example, let's say we have a variable we call count, and for example the value is 0. And for example, we want to execute some block of code for multiple times. What that could be, for example, we want to declare our first while loop, so we'll just make use of this while keyword followed by parentheses, and then we can put our condition over here. So for example, we say that once the count is less than 10, so until the count is less than 10, execute some block of statements. So for example, we'll just say that print this message. So what happens here in the body of the while loop, you can see we are printing a message which is condition. The count is 0 and +1, so add 1 to this count variable, and then make count plus plus. So what it does, the count plus plus, if you haven't watched my previous video, please go ahead and you can see it's called incrementation. So it basically increments the value of count with 1. So in each iteration it will add 1 to the count, and then the loop will be executed. So at first time when the execution is started, so on line number 16 you can see, so for the first time when this line executed and this condition is taken care of, and this condition is evaluated, so you can see the value of count is 0. So 0 is less than 10, that is true. This will execute this block of code. So once this happens and then count is incremented by 1, count will become 1. Now count is 1. I'm just trying to make you understand the concept of the loops, how it really works. So now the count is 1, and it is again checked against 10. So 1 is less than 10. So it is true again. It will execute the same console log message again. And what happens here is count is 1, so 1 plus 1 equals 2, so it will print out 2, and count will be incremented again by 1. So count in this case will become, after this loop, will become 2, and this will again check again with the variable, the value 10. So 2 is less than, in this case 2 is less than 10 again, so the while loop is again true, it will execute it again. So for each incrementation it will loop unless we have a condition, for example, when this become 10. So once it is incremented up to 10, and then we compare these two values. So in this case, count is equal to 10. 10 is less than 10. So that is not true because 10 is equal to 10. So this condition become falsy, and this block of code will not be executed and the loop will be terminated. So this is how it really works. This is a really straightforward example, and we're not doing anything fancy with that. But in real world programs or applications, you're going to be using it for more complex operations or some function execution or something like that. But yeah, this is the core concept of the loop and the way it works. So yeah, let's just save it and see it in action. So once I refresh the page, okay, it's not doing anything. Okay, sorry, I just mistakenly did this. So you can see that it already made the condition falsy. So yeah, I'll just make it 0 just to make it execute, and I'll refresh. You can see it's printed values from 1 to 10. But if you want to get the actual value of the count and not add 1 to this, then we can just print out the value, or more descriptively or explicitly we can say we can print out a message, for example, your loop number is this. So this is the loop number, or we can say, I'll just get rid of your loop number is this, and you can see loop number is 0 to 9. These are 10 loops. So this way it's repeated the code for 10 times. So you can write any block of code over here. For example, you are doing such certain operations or something like that, whatever you want to do, and this block of code will be executed for 10 times. If you want to execute it for example, for 5 times, you can either do this, or you can you can increase the step count. So for example, you can do count equal count plus 2. So it will add 2 instead of 1 to the count, and it will be executed for a lesser amount. So you can see now it's executed for 5 times. And now if I go to, for example, I can write it a short way as well. I can just write it in a shorthand way, which is plus equals 2. So if you don't know what it is, just please make sure you watch our previous videos on, and I've explained it, what it is and how it really works. So it is the same as the other one. So yeah, it will do the same thing. Or you can increase the count or the step to any amount of number that you want. You can just do it 5, and it will the loop will be executed just for 2 times. You can see your loop number is 0 and 5. In this case, the loop number is not correct because we are relying on the count number. But yeah, you can see that this message will be printed only 2 times. So yeah, this is how the while loop or loops in JavaScript works. So yeah, the do while loop. Let's talk about another type of loop. We just talked about while loop, and there is another loop that is called do while loop. The condition check can be moved below the loop body using the do while syntax, do and while. So there is a slight difference between a do while condition, and then we'll just see, but you can already see the syntax. So we have a do keyword over here, and then the body of the loop, and then we have at the end the condition that we just saw. The loop will first execute the body, then check the condition, and while it's true, to execute it again and again until it's false. So yeah, that is the normal way of how the loops works. But in here, the body of the code or the loop will be executed first at least once, and then it will check the conditions. This loop should only be used when you want the body of the loop to execute it at least once, regardless of the condition being true. So when we want to use the do while loop, so for example, you have a circumstance. For example, you have a use case that you want the body of the loop to be executed at least once, regardless of the condition being truthy or falsy. Then and then the condition will be checked. So in that case, you can make use of do while loops. Usually the while loop is preferred over the do while loop. But yeah, let's just see how it really works out here. Let's just go to our VS Code and see how it works. So this is a while loop. We'll just comment it out for now, and we'll write our do while loop now. So for example, I'll see this. And for example, I am going to print out a message which says inside the do block. Okay. And then I'll say while count is less than or greater than 0. So yeah, what happens now? So this statement, the do statement, will be executed. So you can see, as we mentioned before, that the program or the script or the code executed line by line. So when it comes here, it will print out this message, and then it will check the condition. So this message already printed regardless of the condition, whether it's true or false. So we are checking that count is greater than 0, which is false because counter is equal to counter value is 0. So 0 is not greater than 0. So it is false actually. So it will not loop again. But yeah, let's just see how it really works. So once I refreshed it, you can see inside the do blocks. So it executed this do block for us. So what happens now if I do make the condition different? For example, I do something like count is less than, for example, 5. And to make it work, we have to increment the count over here. So once this statement is executed, for example, the do block is executed, then it will increment the count to 1, and it will see 1 is less than 5. The condition will be true, and it will again execute the block of code for us. So once I save it and refresh, you can see inside the block it is executed for 5 times. So yeah, this is how it really works. So there's just this small difference between the while and do while loop. And while loop, you always just start with the condition first. You check the condition. If the condition is true, then execute the statements for us. Otherwise, it will not execute at all. But in do while loop, it first do the action, whatever you want to do first. That happens once, at least once, that this block of code is executed in the loop, and then it checks for the condition, and if the condition is true, it will loop again. If it is falsy, then at least for once your code is executed. So that is the slightest difference between these two loops. So yeah, let's talk about another loop that is widely used in JavaScript, that is called for loops. It's not actually widely used in JavaScript only, but I think in most programming languages like Python or C++ or C, we are using the for loops, and it is very often used. The for loop is a bit complex, but also the most commonly used loop. It has 3 parts. You can see the syntax over here. It's the keyword for is used over here, and then followed by parenthesis, and then it has three parts. The begin part, which is basically initialization part. Then we have the condition part, where the condition is checked against to whether to make a decision to loop the code or not. And then the step. The step is basically how you want to increment the or go through the loop, and you can make a decision over here how you increase or for how many times you want to loop the block of code that you want to execute. And here is the body of the code, the loop. So what the begins to execute once upon entering the loop. So once started, for example, once the execution started from the from the for. So the begin executes this statement, or this expression is evaluated only once. And often we do initialization over here. We will just see it in a bit. But yeah, this is only executed once, the begin part. The condition checked before every loop iteration. If false, the loop stops. Otherwise, it will loop again and again. It will just go through and iterate the block of code inside it unless it is false. What is a step? It executes after the body on each iteration. So after the body is executed, then we do the step count. We increase a value to something, or do the, so it is executed after the body is executed. What is a body? It's basically the body of the loop, or the code, the block of code that you want to execute on each iteration. So that's what we call the body. So yeah, let's just see it in action and see how it really looks. So for example, for now, we just talked about do and do while loops, and we had those examples on there. But yeah, let's just talk about for loops now. So for for loops, we use this for keyword followed by parenthesis, and we do something. So we had three parts: the first part, second part, and the third part, and then we have the body of the code, the body of the loop. So in the first part, we usually do, for example, we do the initialization. For example, I'll just say there's a convention that we use I, or you can use any variable name over here, that I equals 0. So for example, I'm saying to the loop that my loop will start from 0, and then I'm putting a condition, which is basically I want this loop to be executed for example 10 times. So this is the condition. This variable is basically this one that I'm initializing over here, declaring over here. So it says that this value, the I of value is less than 10, which is a condition, and this is evaluated after this. But this begin part is only evaluated in the for loop only once. It's basically the initialization part. This is the condition part, and then we have the step part. The step or part is basically where we do the incrementation. For example, we do I plus plus. So we are saying that, okay, increase the value of I by 1, or we can do, for example, I plus equal 2, or I plus equal 5, incremented by whatever value you want. But for now, we will do I plus plus just to increment it by 1, and we will just do a simple console log, or we can just simply do, for example, loop number over here as well, and then put the value of I, whatever value initialization is here, for example, variable is here, and we will just print out the value over here. Once we save the file and refresh, you can see loop number 0, loop number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the loop is executed for 10 times. So yeah, let's just break down it again for you guys to understand, because I think it's a little bit complex in the while and do while loops, but it's the same concept. There is nothing more complex. But yeah, first we do the initialization part. This is the begin or start point of the loop. So this initialization happens only once, and this part is not executed again. And you can see that we are declaring a variable naming I, and we are assigning a value to it, 0. Then we are doing the check. So once this executed, this part is done, then it goes past the control to this part of the loop, the second part, which is the condition part. So it checks if I is less than 10, which in this case is true because I at the initial point is 0. So 0 is less than 10. This is true. This condition is true. Then it doesn't go to this part directly, but executes the body of the loop. Once the body is executed, then it do the incrementation part. So I is incremented by 1, and again it comes to this condition. It's not going to this condition again. So just a fair point to remember that this is executed only once at the beginning of the loop. So once it is incremented after the body execution, once this I value is incremented, then it passes the action to to the condition part. Now the value of I is 1 because we did the incrementation. So 1 is less than 10. It is again true. This body is executed again, and then after the execution the incrementation is done. But we are seeing that it is basically part of the for loop, but still this is how it really works. The body is executed internally, this incrementation done after the body is executed. So it will run increment the I value unless it becomes 10. All right, so 10 is less than 10, so this condition is falsy. Now the value of I in this case is 9, should be 9 because we are starting from from 0, and it will be falsy, and that it will not execute the statement. So yeah, this is how the loops works basically in JavaScript. So we have learned so far 3 loops. We've learned about while loop, do while loop, and the for loop. We have other loops in JavaScript as well. For example, for of loop, for in loop, and for each loop. And we have some more high order functions and loops that we'll just look into later. But for now, these are very language specific functions, loops that are necessary to learn. And we discussed. Inline variable declaration. And for loop, the counter variable or the incrementation, for example, or the initialization variable is usually declared right inside the loop. This is called an inline variable declaration, as we've seen. So the variable that we are declaring in the first floor or in the beginning part, that is called the declaration, inline declaration of the variable. Such variables are visible only inside the loop and cannot be accessed from outside the loop. For example, if you want to try to execute this variable, because we have declared a variable, it's called I. For example, I want to console log the value of I. So this won't work. This won't be available outside of this loop. You can just access it inside the loop. You can see we're here. So in this block of code, you can execute or access the value of I. You cannot access it from outside. So for example, I want to refresh the page. You can see the loop is executed. After the loop is done, you can see a reference error. I is not defined because it does not know what I is, because it is in the context of the loop, and we cannot access it outside. So yeah, this is something to keep in mind. Instead of defining a variable in the loop, we can also use an existing one. So this here the concept comes in. So for example, you have a variable that you want to reuse, for example, or we can simply put it out of here, okay? And you want to make use of this variable instead of initializing your own. But something to keep in mind: if you omit the begin part or any part of the loop, you just cannot omit the semicolon because it will just throw an error for you. So make sure that you do not omit the semicolon, and but yeah, you can make use of this variable in place. But now we will have access to this variable as well, the I variable as well, because it's now not inside the for loop, but it's outside of the loop, and it's in the script context now. So when I refresh the page, you can see loop from 0 to 9, and the value of I is 10 now. So yeah, this is how it works. Skipping parts. Any part of the for loop between the parentheses can be skipped. Using external variables and begin pace, step can be written inside the loop. So yeah, you can see that we just got rid of the initialization part, and we put it outside of the loop. So this is what we call skipping parts. So we can just take out parts of the loop from outside here. We can also get rid of this. But yeah, as I mentioned, that we don't have to get rid of the semicolons over here. We can write at the end of the loop. So you can see this will work the same way it did before. So you can see the same output over here. So yeah, this is how you can take out the parts of the loop. So this looks like the while loop now. So you can see we are doing the incrementation in the body of the loop, and we are using some external variable for initializing our loop. So yeah, this is how it works. Note that we cannot omit the semicolons that I just told you. So yeah, breaking the loop. So sometimes we want to break out of the loop. For example, we are doing some, we are looping through something. And for example, if we want to see if a certain condition is met, then I want to break out of the loop. I don't want to execute. For example, I'm looping through the loop for 100 times, and if I reach the value 50 over here, then I want to break this loop. I don't want this loop to be executed anymore, because I don't want to loop from 50 to 100, but I just want to find out the number for 50, and I can say that, okay, if the loop is executed for 50 times, and just break out of the loop. So it's just not a very practical example, but just to make you guys understand that we can break out of the loop as well. How we can do that, let's just see. Normally a loop exists when its conditions become falsy. We can also force a loop to exit at any time using the special break directive. So yeah, for example, we have a loop, and then we can put a condition over here. If this certain condition is met, then break out of the loop. Let's just see it in action. So let's say I want to see the loop. I'll just put everything back over here just to make it more cleaner. And yeah, so for example, this will be executed. Okay, I won't touch it. I'll just put a condition over here, and I'll say if I equals, I'll do a strict equality, and just for that, just like that, and I'll say break out of it. So once the value of I become 5, so okay, this is my condition, and when it reaches this condition, then I want to break this loop. I don't want this loop to be executed anymore. I will get rid of this as well. So what happens now? This loop will be executed only 5 times. You will see the message only 5 times, and it will just break out of it. So yeah, I'll just refresh and see it is executed for 6 times, because we are starting from 0. So yeah, after that it's not executed. So this is how the break statement work, or the break directive work. So you can see we have a loop of 100 iterations, but since we are breaking out of the loop on this condition, so it breaks out of it. If we get rid of this this condition, you can go ahead and you can see this loop is executed for 100 times. You can execute it for as many numbers as you want. But sometimes, and for example, let's talk about a practical example. Sometimes you have a list of values, and you don't want put a lot of loops in there, and you want, for example, when you're looking for something, and you're looking for some value, for example, and when that value is found, for example, at any position, then you want to break out of that loop. And you don't want to execute the loop anymore, because it's more of a performance thing and reliability thing. So in that case, you need the break statement. So yeah, this is how you can break through out of the loop. Let's continue to the next iteration. So we have 2 different things: breaking the loop and continuing to the next loop. So the continue directive is a lighter version of break. It doesn't stop the whole loop, but it stops the current iteration and forces the loop to start a new iteration if the condition allows. So what happens is, what we just saw is that if we want to stop the loop on a certain condition, then it will just break the loop and stop the execution of the loop. But we have some conditions. For example, for example, we have certain conditions that we are executing the code on. For example, here is the block of code that I'm executing on each loop. Okay, but for certain conditions, I don't want to execute this block of code. So what I can do is I can continue on that iteration actually. So for example, if I say if I equals 2, when I the number of the number of iteration equals 2, when the loop is executed for 3 times, actually, because we're starting from 0 again, then continue. What this continue does, yeah. So what it does is it skips this loop, it will not execute these statements, and it will get started um, from 3. So it will and do the incrementation again, and it will not execute. So for this loop, for this on this loop, we are skipping the body of the loop. We are not executing the loop body, and we will continue with the other conditions. So this is how it really works. It's a bit complex, but yeah. For example, I refresh it. You can see 0, you can see 1, you can see 3, but 2 is skipped because we are commanding, or we are telling the loop not to execute. We are continuing on this loop. I don't want to print out anything on this condition. So if it is not this condition, you can just print it on 0. It should work on 1. But when it reaches 2, it will continue. It will not execute the body. After this, it will not execute this block of code, and it will continue looping through this. Continue looping through the rest of the conditions. So yeah, okay. We can use it if we are done with the current iteration and would like to move on to the next one. So yeah, this is what we talked about. So if you're done with your if you don't want to execute some block of code at that iteration, or you're already done with something that you already know the value of that, in the loop or something like that, and practical examples, then okay, you just want to skip this part and want to continue. So example is this. You have the for loop, you have the condition, and then you use the continue keyword. Labels for break or continue. Sometimes we need to break out from multiple nested loops at once. We need a way to stop the process if a certain condition is met. The ordinary break after input would only break the inner loop, but that's not sufficient. So labels come to the rescue. Example is this. For example, we have nested loops over here. For example, what by nested loops we mean, for example, I'll just comment out for now. And for example, let's just start from a fresh loop over here. Let's just get started. For example, let's do the initialization. Let's I equal 0, I is less than 10, and then I plus plus. Okay, it will execute the loop for 10 times. What if we have another loop inside the loop? For example, we have let j equals 0, start the loop from 0, j should be less than 10, and j plus plus, and I execute a certain certain lines of code. For example, I can say console.log. I'll print a value. You can see inner loop, and we can print out the value of j, and we can say over here, I'll print a message outer loop. Okay, and the value should be I'll just decrease it because it will repeat the loops for 100 times. I'll have 100 values because you can see the way it works. The nested loop works. For example, if you have a loop inside, let's say we get started from here. This condition is met, it is true, it will execute this block of code. You can see it will start from here, and this is the body of the outer loop. So when it comes here, it will just print out this message once, but when it reaches this loop, this is the inner loop, then it will execute this loop for 10 times. So within this loop, at every condition, or at every iteration, this loop is executed 10 times. So 1 into 10, or then we have 10 times, then 10 into 10 equal 100. So this will result into 100 loops or 100 iterations. So for that reason, I'll just put 2. So 2 into 2, 4 loops. We'll just have 4 loops over here, 4 iterations of overall loops. But yeah, this is how the nested loops works. So now refresh, you can see outer loop, inner loop, inner loop. Then you can see outer loop is executed just for once. On this iteration, the inner loop is looped for 2 times because we have less than 2. Then the outer loop, then it passes the control to the outer loop again, and the value is incremented, and then the inner loop is executed for 2 times. So this is how the inner loop and nested loop works. You can have as many nested loops as you want, loop and inside a loop, loop inside a loop, but that causes performance issues in some cases, and then we have data structures and all that stuff, and we can optimize our code. But that's not our topic, so yeah, I will not discuss that here. But yeah, you can write your nested loops like this, and execute your code. So this is how it works. But for example, to break out of this, for example, on a certain condition, if I want to break out of this loop, for example, I say if I equal 1, okay, if I equals 1, then break. Or for example, if j equal 1, then break. So what I mean by break is, okay, stop the loop at all. If I have found a value somewhere over here inside the inner loop, then I want to break out of these two loops. Let's see if it really works. So if I refresh it, you can see it's still the same because it just skipped one value for us. Okay, now you can see that, okay, it's still executing, but it's not breaking out of the loop. Okay, so this is not working over here. So to break out of the loop, both of the loops, what we can do is we can assign it a label. For example, we can name the loop, and we can put a semicolon. This is the name of the loop. You can name it anything you want, but I can say outer loop. I'll just name it outer loop. Yeah, and I'll just break. Okay, so now I can say, okay, break the outer loop. Sorry, break the outer loop. So this will work. So you can label it anything you want, and you can just say break the outer loop when this condition is met. So when I save it, I refresh the page, you can see now we have this condition met. So once the outer loop is executed once, and then the inner loop is executed. So but once it reaches this condition, for example, j equals 1, when j become 1, then it breaks the loop and it does not execute the inner loop nor the outer loop. So this is how you can break out of a loop, but we don't often use this because we don't tend to use nested loop that much. But yeah, this is a concept that you need to know, how to break out of nested loops in JavaScript. So this is the end of this lecture, and I hope you have learned something new so far. We have talked about different loops in JavaScript. We have talked about while loop, do while loop, and for loop, and then we explained for loop in more details. Yeah, I hope you have learned something new. Please like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to press the bell icon for future updates. Until then, I'll see you in the next lecture.